Marcus was halfway through drafting a project at his desk when a sharp, resonant crash erupted from the living room. It was followed by a jarring thump that rattled the floorboards beneath him. Thump. Something fell over. Thump. Not footsteps, no, this was heavier. Too heavy. More like something, or someone, slamming into the ground. Marcus started to stand, curiosity pulling at him, but an uneasy instinct glued him to his chair. Thump. This time, there were smaller noises layered beneath it, the sound of something folding in on itself. Something falling. A shiver slid down his spine. Bits and pieces of past warnings began stitching themselves into a horrifying image in his mind. Words he'd overheard came back with new weight, "You'll hear her when she jumps." Thump. Marcus sank to the floor without a sound, crawling under the bed frame. The space was so low he had to lie on his back, cheek pressed to the cold wood. Only his head could move side to side. Thump. The bedroom door slammed open with the force of a gale. His chest tightened, breath tearing in and out despite his desperate attempt to stay silent. Thump. This one landed right beside his ear. From this close, the noises were sickeningly detailed, bones giving way, skin separating with a wet slap. Then, silence. Time passed, though Marcus had no sense of how much. He remained rigid, muscles aching, eyes squeezed shut. Gradually, the roaring of adrenaline faded, replaced by the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, whatever had been there was gone. Slowly, he turned his head to the left. Sometimes the brain sees something it refuses to process. That's when moments stretch and twist, like when you read the words terminal illness on a report, or stare down the barrel of a gun. Half of you wants to react, the other half insists none of this can be real. The tug-of-war slows everything, magnifying every dreadful detail. The first sergeant found Marcus the next morning, still wedged under the bed during a wellness check. Marcus shot out from his hiding place, grabbing the man as if his life depended on it, choking out fragments of his story between panicked sobs. The scene had shattered him. Months in a hospital followed, along with 3 suicide attempts. The fourth, well, you've probably guessed how that ended. You see, the old priest had been right, just not entirely. Whatever had looked at Marcus from under the bed that night could never have leaned forward like that. Its body was bent and ruined in ways that defied nature. If she had really been bouncing through the apartment the way Marcus had imagined, he would have been safe. The priest just hadn't accounted for one grim fact: she hadn't been jumping. She'd been landing. And she'd landed on her head. "Wait," I said, leaning against the guardhouse wall. "You're saying he didn't kill himself?" The guy tried 3 times before, locked his door and everything. The first sergeant fixed me with a cold stare. "You can't lock doors in a mental ward." And the last few times I saw him, he didn't seem suicidal, just terrified of being alone. I felt logic clawing at my brain, trying to push away what he was implying. "So you're saying a ghost tied a noose, held the door shut, and shoved him out the window? What about the nurse who supposedly tried to save him?" The sergeant took a slow drag from his cigarette. "I'm saying it doesn't add up. The only person who claims to have seen that nurse is Dr. Chakraborty from the next ward. He didn't know her, and he said she was smiling wider than anyone he'd ever seen. He flicked the ash into the dark. And he's never met a nurse who wears red." Story 2. I once asked a famous ghost hunter about his scariest moment, and I still regret hearing the answer. I was in my second year of college when our student campus activity council announced that a famous ghost hunter was coming to speak at our school. They hyped him up like he was some sort of rock star in the paranormal world. I've been fascinated by the supernatural for as long as I can remember. Ghosts, haunted places, mysterious legends, anything that made my skin crawl, I wanted to know more about. My boyfriend at the time, however, was the complete opposite, a die-hard skeptic who thought all ghost hunters were con artists with night vision cameras. So, I left him behind in his dorm and made my way, alone, to the auditorium. The man who stepped on stage that night wasn't what I imagined a famous ghost hunter to look like. He was small, with a little white professor's beard and a receding hairline. His voice, however, carried an authority that demanded attention. He spoke about the afterlife with such conviction that, whether or not you believed him, you wanted to. We watched footage from his past investigations, grainy videos of shadowy figures, strange audio clips of voices, and unsettling photographs. I remember one story he told about a haunted doll bought from a flea market, a doll that apparently moved on its own whenever no one was watching. He had a way of making the absurd sound possible. Toward the end, he opened the floor to questions. Students asked the usual silly stuff, ever seen anyone's head spin like in The Exorcist? But I wanted something real. Something personal. So I raised my hand. He spotted me halfway back. Yes, you, the girl in the white shirt. I cleared my throat. What's the scariest thing you've ever experienced as a ghost hunter? And right there, I swear, something in his face shifted. The charming smile faltered. He gave a short, nervous laugh. Well, he said, there are so many frightening moments. They pop up quite often in this line of work. He told a story about chasing a poltergeist in an abandoned school where his flashlight died mid-investigation. It was fine. Creepy enough for the audience, but not the kind of thing that seemed like it would shake a seasoned ghost hunter to his core. He never looked back in my direction after that. When the event ended, I avoided the crowd and slipped out through a side exit, heading back to my dorm. That's when I saw him, sitting alone on a bench outside, smoking. I tried to pass without him noticing. "Hey, kid," he called. I stopped. "I'm sorry," I blurted. "I didn't mean for my question to upset you." He waved it off. "Sit for a second." I hesitated but sat down at a safe distance. Up close, he looked much older. Tired. Like the weight of decades pressed down on him. "I didn't tell you the truth," he said quietly. "That story wasn't the scariest thing I've ever experienced." "I know," I said. "And I did." He nodded slowly. "Then let me tell you the real one. It was the late 1970s, he told me, and he was still struggling to make a name for himself. The case came from a frantic mother who claimed her teenage son was possessed, violent, unpredictable, and dangerous. The final straw was when he tried to assault his older female cousin. She survived, shaken but alive, and was sent away while the family sought help. The ghost hunter arrived prepared, holy water, crucifixes, sage, and, disturbingly, a loaded handgun. Not for the ghost, he told me, but for the boy, just in case. When he reached their large Victorian home, all activity had stopped. For 2 weeks, he investigated. Cameras. Recorders. Energy meters. He interviewed the boy, who seemed less possessed and more mentally ill, deeply depressed, maybe disturbed. The only thing that stuck out to him was the basement. The rest of the house was beautifully renovated, but the basement remained raw and ancient, stone walls sweating with moisture, a single dim light bulb, and 4 large slotted drains in the cement floor. Unusual for a house like that, he told me. Unless, but he didn't finish the thought. On his last night there, the family took their son to see a specialist in the city. Near midnight, the parents returned and went to bed. He stayed in the kitchen, reviewing his notes that essentially said the house wasn't haunted. Then, he heard it. A faint sound at first. Then louder. From the spiral staircase that rose from the corner of the kitchen, something was coming down. Not walking. Not floating. Just coming. It had no face. No eyes. And yet, he said, it looked directly into him. Into everything he was. And without moving its mouth, without sound, it spoke. "You know what he did to us." He ran. No hesitation. Left his notes scattered on the table. Didn't stop driving for 30 miles before pulling over to call the family. They moved shortly after. Years later, unable to let it go, he dug into the history of the house. At the turn of the century, it belonged to a respected mortician who built the home himself, living quarters upstairs, funeral parlor on the main floor, and a mortuary in the basement. The drains suddenly made sense. Decades later, another man of status lived there, a community figure accused of abuse of his professional position. The charges were vague, but dark rumors followed. He fled town before trial. The ghost hunter didn't need the details. He knew. The things that were done to those bodies, he told me, were unspeakable. That's why the thing in the stairwell had no face, because in death, it was robbed of one. And that, he said, was the scariest moment of his career, not because of the ghost, but because of the man behind it. I never saw him again, but last week, I moved into a new home with my fiancé. He warned me not to go into the basement, spiders, mold, all that. I went anyway. And there, in the center of the cement floor, was a large slotted drain. Now I can't stop wondering, terrified, what I might already know. Story 3. My parents adopted a dead boy, and I think he spoke to me. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to post a story like this, but something happened recently that I can't stop thinking about. I live in Singapore, a small, modern country in Southeast Asia. I was raised in a typical Buddhist Chinese household. My parents weren't overly strict about religion, but we had an altar in our corridor where they burned incense and offered food to the deities almost every day. A few years ago, I converted to Christianity. It was my personal choice, and although my parents didn't understand it completely, they respected it. In turn, I respected their beliefs. Our differences never caused conflict in the family. Life was good for us. My father owned a small business that allowed us to live comfortably, something not easy in a country where the cost of living is sky high. But a few months ago, his business began to slow down. Not a total collapse, but enough to worry him. That's when his friend told him about something called a kumanthong. The golden little boy. In Thai belief, though not officially part of Buddhism, the kumanthong is considered a spiritual child that brings fortune to its owner. Its name literally means golden little boy, and the original practice was far from innocent. The most authentic kumanthongs came from necromancy, specifically, the body of a stillborn child. The fetus would be surgically removed from the mother, taken to a cemetery, and subjected to a ritual that supposedly bound its spirit. The body would be roasted dry while a witch doctor chanted incantations, then coated with lacquer and covered in gold leaf, hence the name. Some were even soaked in nam man fray, an oil extracted in a gruesome way from the bodies of those who had died violently. Nowadays, most are made using bones, hair, or ashes from infants, sometimes sourced illegally. To believers, the kumanthong is not just a charm, it's a child to be cared for. In return, it's said to bring luck, wealth, and protection. My father's friend swore his own kumanthong had helped him get a big promotion. My father was intrigued. Desperate for a quick fix to his business troubles, he went to a Thai temple and came back with one. DD joins the family. When he first showed it to us, I thought it was just another Buddhist statue. My mother, on the other hand, was delighted. She had heard of kumanthongs before and believed in their power. The statue was about the size of a toddler, painted a dark matte gray, with gold accessories and intricate Thai script written along its arms and back. It sat cross-legged, hands pressed together in prayer. My parents immediately made a mini altar for it, complete with toys, candy, pacifiers, and soft drinks, things a child might like. They even gave it a nickname, DD, meaning little brother, in Chinese. Every meal, my mother would set aside an extra bowl for him. Sometimes my father would ask me to play with him, rolling toy cars toward the altar. They treated him as if he were truly part of the family. I didn't interfere. Even though I had my doubts, and the Christian in me was uneasy about it, I respected their choices. The pull on my leg. Last week, my father said his business was improving again. He credited the kumanthong. My mother agreed. Then came yesterday. It's semester break for me, and I've been working a part-time job. I usually wake up at 6:45 a.m. to catch a train, but that morning, I accidentally turned off my alarm. By accidentally, I mean I knew exactly which button to press, half asleep, without even looking. It was 7 a.m. when I felt it. Something tugged lightly at my leg. Not enough to pull me off the bed, just a small, deliberate pull. I absent-mindedly yanked my leg back and mumbled, "Stop it," thinking it was a dream. Then I heard it. "Jia Jia, it's time to wake up," a young boy's voice. I froze. My eyes snapped open. I'm an only child.